Yo, what's going on? So, today I wanted to talk about a possibly controversial topic or a way of seeing this topic, and that is uh, drawing parallels between, the African slave trade specifically and modern day animal cruelty. Um, but before I go into that, I wanted to get into why I became vegan in the first place. Um, so, say about 5 years ago, when I was a freshman in college, I discovered this YouTuber, Ralph Smart, or Infinite Waters, if any of you have heard of him. And he was always talking about the benefits of, of being vegan and adopting a whole foods diet. And almost every other one of his vids, he was talking about that. And eventually, that rubbed off on me because mostly because I resonated with a lot of what he was saying in his videos. During that time, I was going through a lot of spiritual growth, and I was becoming aware of a lot of things that were going on in the world and around me. And so I was resonating a lot with what he was saying. And so eventually, I guess his words, his influence rubbed off on me. And I pretty much overnight just became vegan. Like it didn't really take much willpower or effort on my part. Um, so among some other reasons as to why I went vegan, one of them is that, um, and I'm going to touch on this later when I'm drawing parallels between modern day animal cruelty and the slave trade. Is I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a possibility that there's some type of spiritual energy exchange that happens when someone consumes a product that has been manufactured immorally. And so one night I was eating, I think, pork or something like that. And immediately afterward, like, I don't know if I created this or that's also possible, definitely, that it was all in my mind. But I, I felt like at that time I was becoming more sensitive to my individual energy, and meaning like how I was feeling in any given moment, my vibration. And I sensed, like, right after eating that, like a very heavy, kind of darkish energy, I guess. um, I just didn't feel very good. And again, like, I don't know if that was all in my head or whatever. That's definitely possible. But after that night, pretty much cold turkey, went vegan. Um, so in the beginning of my vegan journey, I was eating a lot of kind of like processed. Um, Definitely, like, a lot of my protein substitutes were processed, like soy and stuff. And I did that for about a year or so. Or like, I wasn't really eating whole foods. Like, I was a little bit, but mostly I would get like prepackaged vegan stuff, and that was pretty expensive also. Um, then about a year after that, I met a friend of mine who's a really good friend of mine now. I met him at this job I was at the time for about a year or so, and he was also vegan, also a black male around my age, and he cooked all of his meals from scratch. Like he would bring his own meals every day, and he would even go so far as to make his own vegetable stock and vegetable broth and his own coconut milk and almond milk. And even if you're someone that cooks all your own food and kind of buys the ingredients beforehand, like, that is pretty extensive. And it was mainly because he was just so aware of the mind body connection, but also he was aware that a lot of these products today, they have more sugar and other chemicals that are unnecessary, that's, just overall aren't that good for you over time. And when you can make something yourself, you have control over every element, and so you have more control over your health. And he really inspired me to start cooking all my own meals myself. And yeah, so little by little, started cooking my own stuff. Like, nowadays, I pretty much eat a lot of beans, some oatmeal, a lot of greens, have at least maybe one avocado a day. And for protein, the protein myth definitely kind of busted because I don't know if you can see, I'm pretty in shape, and I might post a picture showing you like how I look. Um, but yeah, I get a lot of comments, on my physique, and people are very surprised when I tell them I'm vegan. And I don't know, I'd say the protein myth is definitely a myth. And I don't know if that has something to do with my genetics. I'm African American, so it might be easier for me to stay lean and build muscle, but pretty much I think it's pretty universal that if you eat whole foods, even if it's not vegan, you're gonna keep a pretty lean weight. But in terms of being vegan, you can definitely get enough protein. There's beans, there's hemp protein powder or hemp protein seeds, chia seeds, spirulina, pumpkin seeds, all kind of seeds, nuts. And almost everything has a little bit of protein in it. So if you eat a well-balanced diet, you're almost guaranteed, to get enough protein. But yeah, anyway. So part of the spiritual reason for me becoming vegan was after, really considering becoming vegan, I watched some documentaries on YouTube and Netflix, and I was able to see like what was actually going on in the meat industry and how these animals are being treated and just grown like they're plants or something, or just being almost manufactured. So a lot of these animals being injected with hormones and stuff to make them grow faster. These mothers would give birth to their cattle and whatever animal, chickens, and have their babies stripped away from them. And you could see the pain they're going through. Like, you could see the pain. And a part of me, I just didn't want to be a part of that anymore. So yeah, after being exposed to that, like I said, I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And but over the years, my philosophy has kind of changed. I don't necessarily see all animal product consumption as bad, and I say that because all throughout nature, dominant mammals and dominant species kill other mammals for food, out of necessity. And that's a big point to make there, out of necessity. So I would say that I wouldn't do this personally, but unless you were starving and you had no other choice. But if you go out and hunt your own food, for yourself, and you go about eating meat that way, that not only is it healthier, but I think it's a little more morally okay, at least in my book. But it's the animal's going to be healthier because it's not going to be raised in this prison cell, being fed like all these different terrible stuff for it. And this animal in the wild would have taken care of itself. So if you kill that and you consume that, it'll be a lot more healthier for you. At least that makes sense to me. But again, I wouldn't really do that. And I say that because I'm going to go back to my point about it not being a necessity. So humans, we've evolved to the point where, so when the agricultural revolution started and humans started to settle down and figured out how to grow their own food and whatnot, at that time, eating meat was just something I think we're used to, but it's not completely necessary. Like I said, in terms of getting protein, you can get all the protein you need from plants. There are a few vitamins and minerals that you can become deficient in, I will admit, such as a big one is vitamin B12. But again, that's something that you can easily supplement and in turn, save the lives of a lot of innocent mammals just by getting a few supplements that you might need. I know vitamin B12 is a big one. But, saying that, nowadays, I definitely am an advocate for being vegan, but I understand that, especially since we're so desensitized to what goes on in the meat industry. A lot of people just aren't gonna, want to not eat meat anymore. It's so mainstream. That's really something you have to come to through your own volition. Um, and I understand that people are different places, and if you are not going to be vegan, I do just advocate for adopting a whole foods diet. Because even if you eat meat, you can if you're eating whole foods, and let's say you're buying free range, meat. I've never done that, but supposedly it's better for you, following the logic that I kind of outlined earlier. Then you can be just as healthy as anyone else. The no meat thing, that's more of a personal kind of spiritual thing that you can either feel inclined to pursue or not. I don't judge people at all for their decision in that manner, just because I used to be exactly where they were. I was completely ignorant to what was going on in the meat industry, and there are some people that even aren't ignorant and they choose to continue. And again, I don't judge because we're just so desensitized to it. Like I'll be frank, I'll be honest. I definitely kind of have a big sweet tooth still, something that I'm trying to conquer. But every now and then I'll have a pastry or something like that, or cookie, and a lot of that is definitely cooked, is made with eggs or milk and stuff like that. So it's very hard to be completely perfect. You can, but I just recognize that this is very hard to be vegan and eat whole foods with the lack of options. I mean, it's getting a little better, but there's a lack of vegan and of whole food, and especially vegan options if you go to any restaurant or like fast food place. But yeah. So let me get into my main point of making this, and that is to highlight the parallels between the modern day animal cruelty and slavery. So the commonly agreed upon moral dilemma surrounding the slave trade was that you were taking these other human beings that had emotions, that had a soul, had a spirit, and completely ignoring that and exploiting and utilizing these other beings, and taking advantage of them in order to make life better for yourself or the slave owners, because it's work that they could have done themselves, or they could have hired someone to do, but instead they got kind of almost free labor. You have to buy slaves, but you kind of got free labor. You outsourced this hard work to these human beings, and in the process you're completely degrading them in some instances with whipping and all that. And in the biggest one, a lot of times families were torn apart, and you could see the emotion and the anguish and the suffering that caused. So over time, once people, once our consciousness evolved a little bit, people became more sensitive and aware of that. And now you can't, slavery is abolished because it's such a morally frowned upon practice. So in addition to that, the slave trade itself was instituted by, I read in an article somewhere, the Europeans, when they came over to Africa, you think about it, if you think about it rationally, it kind of makes sense. You see this other culture, and they're living so differently than you, speaking an entirely different language, engaging in practices that you possibly have never seen before, and you just don't understand. And so these Europeans, out of ignorance and naivety, labeled these Africans as incompetent and inhumane, and they used that rationale to justify their means of enslaving, this mass amount of people. And that is reflected, in U.S. law, when Africans were only deemed as 3/5 human. So now, to draw a parallel between that and modern day animal cruelty, if you were to watch these videos, you can clearly see the pain and emotion that these animals are going through. I mean, I'm going to pull up some pictures, probably not, I don't want to make them too disturbing, But I just want you to look into the eyes of this being, of this animal. But this, it's a being just like you and me, and just, you know, see that they have emotions. They don't like being torn from the mothers don't like being torn from their kids, and and this is happening in mass amounts every single day in these slaughterhouses, under the radar. Like most people don't. They might know, but seeing the graphic like images and like actually seeing a documentary is completely different. But again, that's like a huge parallel between what happened during slavery and the animal cruelty in terms of the meat industry. Is at some point, I hope, and that's kind of the point of making this video, we can draw those parallels and over time put an end to that, because we as humans have evolved enough, we're smart enough to sustain ourselves through plants alone, and we really don't need to at least have factory farming. If you wanna go buy a farm and grow your own chickens and cattle, that's different to me. I wouldn't do that, but that's better than, morally to me, than growing these animals like you grow, just growing them specifically just to be killed in these terrible environments. Now, one of the reasons we feel okay doing that is because we feel and we've been taught that animals are less intelligent. But also, so again, going back to, we justify our means of doing this because we don't understand animals and we think they're less intelligent. So again, that's a very strong parallel in terms of the assumption that's made by us, that was made by the European settlers whenever they were looking for a reason to justify their means of enslaving these mass peoples. Now that we've become more aware and we've evolved, we see that Africans, my ancestors, were just as smart, but maybe not in the same way at the time as the Europeans were, and they just didn't understand. I can tell you that probably in their own lands, if you're just growing up, if you're living in a different environment, the definition of intelligence changes. You have to adapt to certain things, and I feel that this is the case, for animals that grow up. Their biology is completely different, but they definitely experience emotions just like us. There's some inner element, there's some soul in there that is experiencing something. Think about, if you go to another country, or just put yourself in the shoes of these Europeans for a second. You go to this other country and these beings, they look, they're a lot different than you. Their facial features, their build, their skin tone, and their language are all different. Now you can parallel that to animals. Animals biologically look vastly different than us, and they speak their own language that we don't understand. But that doesn't mean that their life doesn't have value. We just don't understand. Maybe at some point we'll be able to communicate with animals, maybe not through language, but maybe telepathically. I think that's definitely possible. You can probably look up some examples of that. But, there's a soul in there. And just because we don't understand why they do things or their language, or, just because they're not the same species as us, it doesn't give us the right to treat them the way we do. But just like the civil rights, movement and the movements that have been going on, we're evolving, and more and more people every day are becoming vegan, or just becoming more conscious of what they put into their bodies and what they're contributing to. And you can see that reflected, and there are a lot of restaurants nowadays that have vegan or vegetarian options, and that's definitely a sign of progress. So yeah, I really just wanted to make this video just to make people think about what's going on, just to draw some parallels and open people's eyes to how there's room for us to evolve and be a little bit more compassionate and aware of the rights of these beings to live and experience life for themselves, just like we want to. Like I said earlier, like I understand killing is a natural part of life, but I feel like there's a certain way to go about it morally, and the way that we're treating these animals and exploiting them for our own benefit, when we really don't need to, is the main source of the problem that I'm trying to get at. But yeah, like I said, I definitely have a lot of hope. We're evolving, we're becoming more aware with the internet and social media. Just like, something like the Black Lives Movement has become so prominent because it's so easy to share all this information and all these perspectives instantaneously all over the world, So it's videos like these and just people kind of speaking up and being a little more active and outspoken for, those who can't speak for themselves, relatively, the animals. I think that's great, and I'm very glad to be a part of this process. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Peace.